PodcastCoug Season 5, Episode 5.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PodcastCoug. I am James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the PodcastCoug, where we're all things Cougar football, 30 minutes of Coug talk, and we're talking about our horrific debacle in the Coliseum against USC on Sunday, and, of course, our upcoming game against Cal in Pullman on Saturday. What a debacle down at the Coliseum. Keaton Slavis, their quarterback, right, threw 5 TDs, 4 of them to their receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, as USC just steamrolled, boat raced Washington State, especially that first quarter. What an ugly first quarter. Final 38-13 on Sunday, and I'll tell you, 28-0 on the first quarter. That was just absolutely hard to sit through. You know, what we saw Sunday night, obviously, was a first quarter just blowout, and it couldn't have been worse, right? I thought they competed all the way to the end, right? And if you take a look at the bigger picture and the positives of this game, right? I mean, the first quarter was just horrific, horrible, right? And it's hard to dig yourself out of that hole against a team like USC. But then the final third and fourth quarter, you know, you certainly, from a defensive perspective, you know that Washington State played, you know, pretty well against a really good USC team that had short fields all day long, you know, all night long, right? That first quarter was just, I couldn't believe it. I mean, run the ball. I mean, you know, we've got McIntosh, who's, you know, we can't pass against him. Delora's having his worst nightmare of his career. And, you know, just run the ball. And what about that pooch kick or the squib kick, you know, at halftime or whatnot? I mean, coming out, I mean, that was just not called for. I mean, it just looked horrible. But, you know, we had so much momentum running the ball, right? But not throwing the ball. And so it's just, you know, you'd love to have that over again. But, you know, Delora looked like a freshman, right? Still a freshman. The freshman makes a mistake. He looks young and green, and he was young and green, right? And defenses like USC make the freshman quarterback just look like a freshman quarterback. I mean, a true freshman. And so, you know, you got to give credit. USC's defense absolutely throttled Delora, who had 2 interceptions and a fumble. And of course, this gave USC great field position in minutes. I mean, it just felt like it's going to be another one of those 55-0 blowouts. And, you know, 38 points, I mean, we're lucky. They were going for 50. You know, you could tell. They kept their starters in there all game long, right? And so, anyway, besides Delora having just the interceptions, they just didn't have the explosiveness. The Cougs, you know, they just didn't have. I mean, you can talk about talent. You can talk about 5 stars versus 3 stars, but we really it was so difficult to keep up the pace with SC. And you know, Delora finished 18-29 and 134 yards, and he was sacked 3 times, and he ran for minus 17 yards. I mean, you know, the guys are right. I mean, he minus 17 yards and fumbled, you know, just missed the exchange with Deion McIntosh. I think Deion should have ran most of the game. And, you know, I mean, who's to say he's not as good as Max, right? I mean, right now, that's all we got. You know, Max might be coming back for Cal. We're going to talk about that on the second half of this episode. But, you know, take a look at their QB against Slavis. Went 25 of 32, passed for 287 yards. St. Brown finished with 7 receptions, 65 yards. His 4 scores tied a USC record for TDs in a game, for TD receptions in a game. And so, you know, USC, who's running the air raid, you know, thanks to Graham Harrell, right? just had 5 rushing yards. When was the last time USC had 5 rushing yards in an entire game? I mean, that's crazy. That's like Leach, right? So Renard Bell, 76 yards receiving, 1 touchdown, and Treval Harris, Harris had 74 yards. So they were kind of really close between Bell and Harris. And, of course, we saw Gunnar Cruz and Cameron Cooper played in the fourth quarter. And Cruz went for 5 of 7, 34 yards. Cooper went for 3 of 3 for 22, and I personally thought that Cameron Cooper looked a little more confident. You take a look at the eyes in Cruz, right? And Gunnar Cruz, his eyes, man, it was just over his head, I think. I mean, I know he's competent, but, Cameron Cooper seemed to be more confident, and he just seemed to be it just seemed like it wasn't as overwhelming, but it was great to see both of those guys. And, of course, Deion McIntosh had 65 yards on 10 carries. And for the first time, we saw Clay Markoff, right, who got 4 carries in the fourth quarter for 12 yards. So where do we begin? I mean, Delora is looking like a freshman, inaccurate throws, and just looking afraid, intimidated, biggest stage he's ever played on in his entire life, letting USC's D just jump all over him, and like I said, SC's got some major talent. I mean, their guys go pro without even hitting the green. I mean, playing a down, they go to the pros. So it's funny. You see the difference. You certainly can see that difference. This is why we've only beat USC 10 times since 1920. 10. I'm not talking about the Coliseum. I'm talking about Pullman, right? Spokane, and Los Angeles, a total of 10 times. And that's really sad, right? But anyway, that's the difference. And, anyway, you just can't throw the ball like, we've seen, like, we're talking Delora, right? We are so used to seeing great, proficient quarterbacks throwing the ball. We're accustomed to that. We just didn't see that on Sunday. Nowhere near a polished passer. And it could have been several reasons. Granted, he was coming off of a COVID, right? Not that he had COVID, but at least he possibly was negative. And in 2 weeks of not playing football, and then you enter the Coliseum, which is just, it really is the lore of the Coliseum. It really is an intimidating place to play, and he just didn't seem like he had the savvy and what it takes to command the offense, at least on Sunday. We didn't see that in him on Oregon State down in Corvallis, but he just didn't have the command of the offense, and he can make some plays with his legs, but the deep ball was absolutely non-existent. So there you've got that USC intimidation value, right? With nobody in the stands, the place is still allure. The band wasn't playing, huge intimidation, and the core of LA, right down in Los Angeles, and a lot of our guys are from there, right? They grew up there, right in their backyard. It's a big stage, big time venue. Again, just not impressive, from the top to the bottom with Delora. And, granted, he's a freshman and there's going to be better days, but it was USC and just he just didn't look like he belonged there, right? So, it was so obvious that USC wanted to hang 50 or more on us. Like I said, they just kept Slavis in the entire time except for one series, and they kept him in the very end, all the way to the end of the game except for one series, and their starters were pretty much in it the whole game. And I think Rollo put Cruz in. It was great that, Coach Rollo put Cruz and Cooper in the fourth quarter and knew that we weren't going to come back. There's no comeback there, but it was great to get those guys playing, right? Just to see. And, we should have ran the ball more. I mean, run it, when it's 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2, run, right? When we've got McIntosh, we've got proven those open holes all day long. And what happens? Throwing the ball on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, right? Are you kidding me? I mean, we just run it. I mean, look at this. Deion McIntosh is really effective, and he was. I mean, he didn't have a 100-yard gain, but there were some open holes, and I just, you got to scratch yourself. Why are they passing on short yardage? So, then it's 4 and out, right? So, the score, if we would have just ran the game down their throats, just run the ball down their throats, I personally believe the score would have been like 38-27, instead of 38-13. So anyway, out-coached, outplayed, out-hustled, outdone. Team was intimidated. Another lore in the Coliseum, right? And another lore of the Coliseum. And we, the Trojans, like I said, we've only beat them 10 times since 1920, and it's a difficult place to win. It really is. So, missing Max, right? And a couple of our DBs are lost. We lost some wideouts from, last year, and it really showed against a really good Southern Cal team. Certainly these are growing pains, right, for Coach Rollo, a very young team. And, this has been just a gutless performance from Washington State. And if you look back, I was looking back, right? This has been the worst disaster since our 49-6, loss blowout against Utah in 2012 down in Salt Lake. So it's been about 8 years since we've really taken a beating like this. So, and, in memory of the recent past, Leach would, take a look at what Leach did. 5 straight bowl games prior to this year, starting with a program that was 9-40 that he inherited, and, 4 years before he came to Pullman. So, we've just been really fortunate with the last 5 years. And, it's, as an excuse, though, we can call this season, it's a preseason season, right? With all these games, this mishmash and, guys not on the roster and a mishmash of games canceled or postponed. And, until we play SC next time, let's just focus on next week. And we're talking about Cal Berkeley, right? In Pullman, right? Cal next, right here, coming up on the second half of the Podcast Coug.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the PodcastCoug Radio Network. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at PodcastCoug.com.
The real estate agent you work with matters, and a great agent helps you own the home of your dreams. And your dreams come true with James Laurie at Coldwell Banker Bain, representing clients like you 24/7, from condos to colonials and everything in between. If you're selling, buying, need a price analysis, or just a contractor referral, ask James, winner of the 2015 through 2019 International Coldwell Banker Diamond Award, with dozens and dozens of 5-star Zillow reviews, and Seattle Magazine's 5-star award winner for 2018 through 2020. James Laurie, Coldwell Banker Bain, at 425-466-3672 or jameslaurie.net. Rock solid results.
You're listening to the Podcast Coug.
2 running backs in with the quarterback. Signals called. All man in motion going through to the right side. Handoff. Wings out to the right side. Touchdown, Washington State.
You are listening to the Podcast Coug.
Welcome back to the second half of the Podcast Coug. I am James Laurie, the Podcast Coug, and we're all things Cougar football, all things Cougs. Here we go. It's Cal the Saturday night, Martin, 7:30, FS1, and this might be the last game of the year, right? I mean, there was talk that there might be the AC playing out, possibly Apple Cup, but I don't think that's going to happen. I could be wrong. Looks like the last game of the year at 7:30, FS1. Cal opened as a 2.5-point favorite, and they surprised everybody in Berkeley, right? Beating Oregon, picking up their first win of the year, 21-17 over the overhyped Ducks, right? Yep, they're 1-3, and they had losses to UCLA, Oregon State, Stanford, right? So surprisingly, they're 1-3, but coming off of Saturday's win against Oregon and a big win, this may be as good as a Cal team that we've seen since the 2019 Redbox Bowl. They beat Illinois, so. this, Cal, they should have beat Stanford, a couple of weeks ago, and they've outscored their opponents 44-41 in the last two games, while the Cougs have outscored 81-42. And, think about it, in most recent years, Cal has developed a formula for stopping Washington State, right? Their offense, since, Justin Wilcox took over in 2017. Wilcox is a great coach. Guy he knows how to, he's great against the Cougs. And, we've just scored 36 points in the past three times against Cal, while Cal's offense hasn't shown, much promise this season, these four games, including the Oregon win. I mean, their offense is just not that explosive, but, rumor has it that, we're going to be without our edge, Willie Taylor. He could be out, for the rest of the season. Right. And that's in addition to the five players that we lost on that USC game. So anyway, Chase Garbers, quarterback, he had some really good plays against Oregon, including a 28-yard touchdown pass against Nico Remigio, and he ended in that 21-17 victory. And I tell you, Cal, you never know, they always play us tough. They got some really good playmakers at Cal, and like I said, Wilcox knows what he's doing for sure. They're going to be ready. The temperature is going to be like 30, possibly 27 at the end of the game. I mean, maybe 30 at kickoff, 20. It's going to be cold. Justin's saying that they're going to bring, of course, all the cold gear. They're going to gear up, right? So, despite Cal's recent success against the Cougs, the Bears they don't have a stout defense, like we've seen in the past. They're allowing 27 points per game, ranks 5th in the Pac-12, and we hope we see a new scheme and a balanced play calling, which, can cause headaches for Cal. We hope that it is just going to be more balanced out. They have the air raid down really well, right? And getting back to Max Borghi, Max is most likely going to return. It just looks like Max is going to be back for the last game of the year. Again, I'm going to be surprised if there is an Apple Cup, but anyway, Borghi's had 2 weeks of full practices, and it looks like he's going to be playing, not for sure deal, but Dion is real, right? Dion McIntosh, really happy with it, even though he had 90 yards at USC. I mean, I think Dion is the guy. He's real, and I'm fine. I mean, everybody's talking about, let's get Max back. Hey, just run the ball with Dion. I mean, run the ball. I mean, right? So, if there's open holes, just run it. And down their throats, like I said on the first half. So, everybody's talking about Max, like I said, and I think McIntosh is better than what we've seen the past decade. That includes Booby, right? James Williams, Jamal Morrill, and Gerard Wicks. Nothing against those guys at all. Those guys are good guys. But Dion, I think, is better. And in the meantime, we got Jake Dickert, who's watching the Golden Bears offense, saying, you know what? Hey, we're going to take you on, right? In the cold, in the 27-degree temperature. And, so anyway, it's, think about Arizona State. They've played fewer games, and they're the only other team in the Pac-12, right? We're talking Arizona State, the only other team in the Pac-12 that is yet to score 30 points. And Cal's performance of 320 yards per game ranks the last in the conference. So we're not talking, you never know what's going to happen on Saturday night, but, remember, this is Pullman, right? It's going to be cold, right? Temps, like I said, 30, maybe 27, 30 at kickoff, 27 at the end of the game. And, they're going to be bringing in their snow gear. Like I said, their socks, layering up, shirts. It's Pullman. It's 30 degrees. So, normally this time of the year, right, coaches are on airplanes, right? They are traveling, and they're going into recruits' houses, their living rooms, right, meeting the parents. And not this year. Of course, 2020 is anything but this year, but they're zooming it out, do special IT presentations, right, about Washington State, athletics, academics, the campus, college town. You got it, right? And you got to go with the changes, right? Just roll with it. And they're not, obviously, they're not traveling, but they're zooming it. And so that's what's going to happen right after, because there's the recruiting deadline here coming up for recruits. And so coaches are going to be really busy with that process on recruiting. Hey, that's it for episode 5 of the 5th season of the Podcast Coug. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. Hit the like button. And if you haven't already, check out our new website at podcastcoug.com. It's Cal at Washington State Saturday. God bless and go Cougs.
You've been listening to the Podcast Coug with your host, James Laurie. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the Podcast Coug Radio Network. Find us at podcastcoug.com.